Good evening, good morrow, and good day, and welcome to another edition of Slice and Dice, here talking all about everything that happened in the last 5 sessions of the Manylands campaign here on Slice and Dice. Now, this is a bit of a change into our usual schedule, but then we have got a lot of changes in our usual schedule coming, because this is in fact the last Monday night live stream that I will be doing with the Manylands campaign, as that will be moving to its new home. That's Thursdays fortnightly from the 10th of June, so just under 2 weeks until the next session of that. And also, admittedly, in our Monday night slot today would usually be the next session of The Cage. However, due to incompetence on my part, the last session of The Cage recorded that was meant to go up today everyone was muted except for me. So it was very one-sided, and so not great viewingship there. However, fortunately, it was mostly a combat-heavy session, so it can be summarized within a few sentences, and so that's going to be the plan for the next session of The Cage. When that goes up, it will just have a little sort of starting summary from me about what happened in the previous session, so that you're all up to date. Now, speaking of getting up to date, that's exactly what we're doing today, with everything from session 66 up to session 70, milestone number. Anyway, thanks for joining me here live on Twitch. You can also watch this on demand on YouTube once that goes up, which should be later on this week. If you're not following us on YouTube already, make sure that you do so. Go and subscribe there, because you can watch all of the sessions that I'll be referencing today in their full splendor. If you're out and about and don't have the visuals available to hand all the time, you can also listen to every session so far via our podcast channel. Just go to anchor.fm/slice&d6 to find our podcast. It's also our podcast, Slice and Dice, is available wherever you get your podcast, on all of the major podcast distributors. So if you use Spotify, if you use Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all of the rest in between, we are. If it's a podcast thing, we're probably on there. So you'll be able to listen to us no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. So you can always have some Slice and Dice in your life. Speaking of which, join our Discord to have Slice and Dice in your life throughout the week and interact with myself and, of course, all the players in all of our campaigns and other fun stuff that we talk about on there. Lots of memes, lots of discussion, voting on upcoming videos. There's a subscriber-exclusive chat for those of you who have subscribed with us on Twitch, such as Pavel in the chat. Because it's in a very exclusive club, which you can be a part of just by subscribing to us here on Twitch. You also get a discount in our merch store, which is a Teespring store. I think it's now called Spring, actually. springstores.com/slice&d6, I believe, is that. But there's a link to that, along with all the other stuff that I've been shamelessly plugging here on our Twitch page. Various logos, click them. It'll take you to the various corresponding pages. Anyway, all of that plugging out of the way. It's a very hot bank holiday Monday. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're enjoying the sunshine. Maybe watching this while sitting outside. That would be a good plan. Make sure you put sunscreen on, or you will get a bit burnt, like I have on my forearms over the last 2 days. And apparently I am also a glutton for punishment, because I am here sitting inside on a very hot day wearing all black. So I'm doing well, is the long and short of it. Pavel says, hope you have not really feeling it since I'm off anyway. Well, so it's just another average Monday for you, Pavel, but not a normal bank holiday. Not a normal Monday for you, because of course, instead of a live stream, it's just me talking about things. Woo! So let's start with session 66 then, and everything that happened since then. So the previous session 65, was when we said goodbye to our most recent guest star on the Manylands campaign, which is Araz, playing the Warforged fighter known as Glaive, who we've kind of repurposed, reskinned as an animated statue that's been brought to life by one of the gods, so it seems. So, in session 66, the first thing that we do is we catch up with the other part of our party, because since I think probably session 60, so 10 sessions at this point we've had, or 11 actually. We've had the party separated after the Dragonborn Wyvern Riders from the Dragonborn Kingdom of Rachir, which borders Burikrin, and the Eyrie, which the monks are a part of, kind of sits on that border. And so the Dragonborn came in to intervene with the Manticore invasion. If you've only just joined this stream for the first time, this is all going to sound like absolute nonsense. But basically, along the campaign so far, we've had a lot of sessions. The Eyrie monks are all flying bird people, or Aarakocra. Thank you, Zychez, in the chat. They were enslaved by manticores and forced to do their bidding for them, which was to try and locate halflings and other small creatures that supposedly one of which carries something of great importance. It does get a bit Tolkien, looking for a bone dagger, which is one of them has supposedly taken, which is of import to the Manticore's masters, who it appears are the Red Mages, who the party have encountered many times, at least 2 or 3 times already in the campaign, who seem to be after certain things of importance to them. So yes, the Dragonborn intervened with the Manticores, believing, or so it's been told by their source, that the party were in fact spies from Burikrin who had enslaved the Eyrie with the Manticores. They thought they were in cahoots with the Manticores, when the party believed that it is the Red Mages who are in cahoots with the Manticores. But there's no Manticores left alive at the Eyrie to say this after the Dragonborn Wyvern Riders came in and all this stuff went down. And so the Dragonborn took great interest in Naeris, the High Elf sorcerer of the party, draconic bloodline sorcerer, because it appears that she bears the mark of Ushtag, the great red dragon of old, or Ushtag the Deceiver, as he was otherwise known, a much feared and maligned great red dragon of old, a real tyrant who has basically been who's still worshipped by some as a god, but is the least liked of all of these dragons and the most feared. And so anyone bearing his sign is somebody of suspicion and also of import. And so the Dragonborn wanted to take Naeris back to the Dragonborn Kingdom with them to present before the king to see what he would wish to do about this, as well as wanting to bring back some Burikrin spies, which they believe them to be, to see if the king believes that they are spies or not. For it is not for the soldiers to decide if these people are in fact spies. It should be up to the king and his council. So as a bargaining chip, the party negotiated that Bruchon would be the one to stay behind at the Eyrie, because Bruchon, the dwarf monk, would like to spend some time at a monastery, so it makes sense for him to be the one to stay behind and learn from Master Talon and the other Aarakocra monks of the Eyrie. But that has meant that as a consequence, we've had kind of 2 separate running stories at once, so we'll occasionally flip back and find out what Bruchon's been up to while the rest of the party are getting up to whatever they're getting up to, and things just keep happening, so it does slow things down with getting the party reunited. But I can safely say now, we're going into session 71, they are about to be reunited, but we will get to that. So, sip of water. As I said, it is bloody hot in here, so bear with me. I will have to keep on being hydrated because it's important. So we kind of flash back to Bruchon at the beginning of session 66 to find out what he's been up to. His training continues with the Aarakocra, having a close fight with a kestrel-like Aarakocra. Seems to be one of the toughest of them. The Dragonborn observe this fight as well. They seem to be keeping tabs on Bruchon and seeing, if he's up to snuff. And in the evening, Master Talon, the head of the monastery, hands Bruchon a copper bowl with water from the lake at the centre of the Eyrie. Which is actually known as a singing bowl, and it comes with a striker as well, which helps it kind of to make it sing by just striking it, or by moving it with a bit of water over the rim, in the same way as I guess those who use glasses to make music would do. So he gives them this gift to aid Bruchon with his meditations. This singing bowl kind of has a bit of the bardic magic about it. That it's the magic is kind of interlaced into music and into sound, and so there's various effects from this particular magic item, a homebrew magic item, the singing bowl. I can now, as this is a behind-the-scenes kind of chat, I can give you some of the inner workings. So I'll pull it up on D&D Beyond, and I'll tell you exactly how the item works. Sign it. Whoa! I haven't had to sign into D&D Beyond in a long time. Right, I'm signing in. Oh, they've sent a code to my phone. It's all happening. Bear with me, everyone. And that is the code. Boom. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've had to do a code on D&D Beyond, but here we are. All right, so the singing bowl. Achieving true oneness and a clear mind can be challenging for some monks. For those, some monasteries offer the singing bowl, a deep bronze bowl with striker so named for the melodic notes that resonate from it when struck or rubbed by the striker. The tones from the bowl share some connection with the weave, similar to a bard's music, and can aid monks in their meditation. Don't know why I put an apostrophe there. If you or any friendly creature who can hear the singing bowl regains hit points at the end of a short rest by spending one or more hit dice, each of those creatures regains extra hit points equal to your martial arts die. So in essence, the first effect of the singing bowl is the equivalent of the Bard's Song of Rest ability, the level 2 ability. But instead of it being just a set die amount, it's instead, because it's for monks, it's in line with their martial arts die. So creatures can regain extra hit points, a nice little buff that benefits everyone. I just felt like it was very appropriate for what it was, that everyone's hearing the tune. It made a lot of sense. But where things get really crazy, and where I know Bart has taken a lot of interest, who plays Brucon, is in the second possible effect. When using the bowl to meditate, as part of a short or long rest, a monk may place water in the bowl and perform a ritual. Roll a d100 and add your monk level to the roll. The effect that the ritual grants is determined by your roll. If the effect is a special, you cast it immediately at its lowest level without requiring any material components. I think it's meant to say if the effect is a spell. That is a typo. I really need to re-edit this. Just a couple little typos there. If the spell requires a saving throw, the DC equals 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your wisdom modifier. So, full disclosure, peeking completely behind the curtains, here are all of the effects. So, on the D100, if you roll, well, the minimum you can roll is 2. Because this is a D100 plus your it's rolling a D100 and adding your monk level. So the minimum you could roll on a D100 is 1, and the minimum monk level you could be is 1. So the minimum here is 2. So between 2 and 55, no effect. 56 to 65, until your next short rest, you understand the literal meaning of any spoken language. So it's kind of in line with the monk ability. I think it's a much higher level. I think it's possibly level 14 ability, where you can understand any language, or anyone can understand you speaking if they can understand a language. Let me bring it up right here. Tongue of the Sun and Moon, the 13th level ability. Starting at 13th level, you learn to touch the key of other minds so that you understand all spoken languages. Moreover, any creature that can understand a language can understand what you say. So there's a bit of that in there, with that you can understand the literal meaning of any spoken language. So you can understand them. They won't be able to understand you. So it's a little taster of that 13th level ability. If you roll 66 to 75 on the die, on the D100, you stare into the water and gain an insight into future events. You cast the Augury spell. 76 to 85. A creature, place, or item of significance determined by the DM takes root in your mind. Until your next short rest, you know its location. So in effect, kind of like a locate object, but locate area. Then the next one, 86 to 95. As you meditate, you feel an aspect of your soul transported to another place. You cast clairvoyance. Then the next one, 96 to 100, so the brackets get smaller at this point. 96 to 100, you achieve complete harmony with the world around you. You cast Commune with Nature. It's quite a cool spell, thought it'd be quite flavourful, so I threw that in there. And then 100 to 105, 101 to 105, apologies, you establish a cosmic connection to a creature of your choice. You cast Scrying. Scrying, a very useful spell, especially as a DM. Scrying has a lot of potential, that divination spell. So there's a real divination theme to the Singing Bowl. And then finally, remember this is the D100 plus your monk level. So the final one is 106 and above total. You achieve perfect focus. You may choose any effect from the table. So if you end up getting a score of 106 or above, you can choose any effect you like because you've honed your meditating that much that you can then sort of bend the divination magic from the bowl to your will. So I kind of wanted that feel of progression, and it made sense by having the levels in there that as you leveled up, you would get better at meditating. You get better at using this bowl, and because you're getting this. Brucon has received this bowl at level 6, so he's still got quite a lot of time in his career left. But interestingly, being 6th level means that even now, if he rolled 100 on the D100, he would be able to choose any effect from the table. So it's quite a nice tease, I think. It's very unlikely, but becomes slightly more likely as he goes through his adventuring career. And it was just it was a lot of fun to create the item. It's been something that I'd had on my mind for this particular character for a while, and then to kind of actually see it through to fruition. Very rewarding, and I think it's going to be an item that could well be useful to the party going forward, particularly as they don't have a bard in the party, so they're getting a little bard buff without having to have somebody with that class. But maybe they might do in the future, and in which case they're going to be doubling up on that, helping out on their hit points on a short rest. So, it's all good. It's all good. Anyway, so, this is kind of so with Brucon, it's kind of montages at this point with what he's been up to, and him undergoing training and becoming a better monk. Having to harness his focus, his meditation, and all these great things, and he's doing all this on his own, whilst under the watchful eye of the Dragonborn. We'll catch up with Brucon later on, of course. In other sessions. But meanwhile, the rest of the party are not quite ready to leave Hilberg, but they are preparing to do so. They just need to get some final things to sort themselves out. But of course, there are some stumbling blocks in the road. Seth continues to negotiate with Jackburn because Jackburn Winklebottom lost his inn, Flaming Jack's. It burned to the ground, seemingly burned down by the Red Mages, who were after Jackburn because he has a bone dagger, because he is the creature that they sought. But I think they didn't know his identity, and so finding the inn as close as they got to him. And Jackburn is a wily sort and has friends who know the terrain very well, such as Greenblade the Ranger, and so he's able to make his escape. But now, with the Manticore situation taken care of, Jackburn now doesn't have a pub. He's a taverner. He's a tavern owner with no tavern. So the party have a house which they don't want because they're not planning on putting roots in Hilberg. In fact, they were looking to head back to the Dragonborn, potentially to be taken over to the Dragonborn Kingdom. So they wanted to up sticks and leave. They've been gifted this house for their help dealing with a werewolf problem in Hilberg, and so it kind of made sense for the party that they were going to get quite a bit of money, which is one thing they've been short on, for an asset they don't need. And so with Jackburn requiring an inn and the party having a very large residence going spare, they decided that this would be a great happenstance to make a deal. And so Seth has led the negotiations because Seth likes money and likes getting a lot of it and likes to drive a hard bargain. And so, and so he's been negotiating hard with Jackburn until Malar interrupts him and heads straight to the temple, because Malar has had business which he's been wanting to take care of since pretty much the beginning of the campaign. At the beginning of the campaign, Malar went to Flaming Jack's bar and grill, where he met Seth for the first time. Seth brought there after escaping from a prison wagon. Malar actually was meant to go and meet Lady Helene Grenforth, who was on a philanthropic mission to journey around the border between Richir and Burikrin, and then never showed up. And then, as it turned out, as it transpired, Lady Helene had been led into a basilisk's cave and had been turned to stone and then taken away by her captors, who were also from the Crowflies, from a rival house. And so eventually the group managed to take Lady Helene's statue back, but cannot turn it back from the stone. And so Malar asked his superiors from the Hammerfern Institute to send him it was proposed actually to him by his superiors to demonstrate his abilities as a cleric, to be sent a scroll of greater healing, and for Malar to use it. And if he is successful, then Lady Helene will be resurrected and turned back to flesh rather than stone. And so this was kind of a big test for Malar, and it was a massive moment, and it was a real joy to see it play out as well. Because Dan brought the rest of the party, like he summoned the entire group, no matter what bits of shopping the rest of them were up to, he summoned them all to the temple to kind of have his friends around him. Some of them could offer magical buffs. I think Leo cast resistance on him just in case. I think Malar gave himself guidance before doing the scroll, all in the trying to kind of skew the odds in his favour a little more. And I think he got advantage on the roll because of all the support that he was getting from the party. And then, wouldn't you know it, he rolls a natural 20, just perfect. Because bearing in mind that was his goal from session 1, and he only had and so he's been waiting since. He didn't know she was turned to stone at that point, but for a good 50 sessions, he's known that. That Lady Helene's been turned to stone and been able to do nothing about it, like his original purpose in the game. And finally, so it was a really big moment in session 66 where he does bring her back from the stone. It was a fantastic moment. Now, unfortunately, I haven't prepared the video clips this time. It's been a crazy weekend. But yeah, that was a fantastic moment that I definitely used on social media, and one of many reasons why you should check out session 66 for yourself on our YouTube channel. So as I said, the others did some shopping to get certain things that would either material components for spells, other things that were going to help them. Brina had also been tasked with getting a rare ingredient for her mother, the chief alchemists of Svirfhaven. Brina, of course, being a Svirf Neblin herself, a deep gnome. And so she did that. But meanwhile, while all this was happening, Leobrin was dealing with a cursed item. Now, Leobrin is an interesting character, the only one that I've seen in my D&D playing thus far who had a negative constitution score, and at level 6 has, I think, 12 or 13 hit points, 13 hit points, which is just insane that he's still alive at this point, frankly. And to make matters worse, he got a ring off of the leader of the Manticores. This ring gives a temporary buff. It gives you, I think, 20 temporary hit points every time you slay a creature. Every time you bring a creature to 0 hit points, it's kind of there's a vampiric quality to the ring that it gives you vitality by taking it from somebody else. The twist of it, the curse of it, however, is that if you do not take any life, if you do not do this within a 24-hour period, the ring's bloodlust must be sated, and it will instead take from your life force. It will drain the wearer, and so Leobrin, his maximum HP has gone down by 1 and he was having some nightmares, feeling like very gaunt, very pallid. And so at that point, the group realised, we need to do something about the Oberyn. They thought he might be turning into a werewolf or a vampire or something overnight, so they kind of boarded up his door just to make sure, because trusting as the party is, just to make sure that, he doesn't turn and kill everyone. Very sensible, actually. But no, that wasn't what happened. As I said, that was the curse as it was, and by resting overnight, that meant that Malar, being the cleric, could then prepare to cast Remove Curse on the item, which he does, and it works. And then the ring itself slips off. Now, I think they still actually have kept a hold of the ring, because I don't think it destroys it by casting that spell on it. But it's so it's still there. There is potential to use it in the future, but I think the Oberyn may have learnt his lesson from that particular item, that that generally these things can have a catch. If it gives you a great ability, it's got to take something in return. It seems to be the natural balance with a lot of these items. Okay, that's not true of all items. Some of them just have great buffs, and that's the way that it is. But especially with cursed items, I think that's one of the reasons I really like cursed items, because there's some of them are just real bitches and real horrible. They just do really horrible, nasty things to the fool that puts it on, which is why I guess a lesson to make you more cautious about picking up magic items in the first place. But I really like the ones that have that kind of give and take about them. That aspect. I think there was a magic item from Ghosts of Saltmarsh. I think that was it. It was a cursed luckstone, which actually, as curses go, is a very mild curse. But it also would be a kind of cursed item that I had it as one of my players in a different game, and it was one of those items one of those cursed items that I didn't really want to remove the curse on, because it kind of it made it wasn't that bad, it wasn't that limiting, and also it was quite characterful. And basically, the cursed luckstone ability means that when you can activate it once a day, I think, to give you advantage on a roll. But the curse is that then, after doing so, the next 2 rolls you make will have disadvantage. So you get 1, but you lose 2. And so that kind of, as I said, give and take, just seems like a real fun and interesting concept for a character, and for an item, should I say. And I think, I could be wrong, but I believe that that's kind of part of the ethos with the Blood Hunter class, the custom class created by Matthew Mercer, which I think is all available on D&D Beyond. That the Blood Hunter's magic comes from taking some of their own vitality, taking some of their own blood to then channel into their magical powers. So it's quite gothic, but equally it's quite a cool concept, I would say. So with Lady Helene free from the stone, she is, of course, very grateful, and equally she's then informed by the group and by her 2 bodyguards, Tina and Turin the dwarves, about her fate and what has happened since she's been turned to stone, and plans to head back to her home in Grenforth in the Crowflies. And so her and her bodyguards make a plan to leave via boat from the capital of Burikin, called Rundar. And of course, the party know a particular fellow who they more or less trust, who is based in the Crowflies. Hi, Family Fantasy RPG. Howdy, hey there. How you doing? Hope you're well. Just doing a little roundup of all of the previous sessions. I will try and keep this as brief as possible, not only because this is just a catch-up thing, but also because, as I said earlier, it is sweltering in here today, and I don't want to pass out live on stream. That's not on the agenda for today. So, as I said, the party already know the first guest star ever in the campaign, which was well over a year ago now, which was Midge, or Tom Midgley, who played the character. Oh my God, his name's gone. Oh no! Oh, Howland Cragmere, who's the bodyguard of one of the members of House Bronn, which is the third of the 3 main houses in the Crowflies. Grenforth, which Lady Helene is from, being one. The Rookwoods, who seem to be the enemy of the Grenforths and the ones behind her abduction, being 2, and House Bronn being the 3rd. So they contacted Howland Cragmere, or Malar used the sending spell to notify Howland Cragmere that Lady Helene was heading back to Grenforth, and suggested that he should go and assist the lady from an entirely different house, in the hopes that he'll do that without notifying his master, Gant Bronn of House Bronn, which was a bold move to ask. Oh yes, so you know your liege lord that you've been serving for your entire life. You know how he's a bit shifty. Maybe just don't tell him this and go and serve one of his rivals, and that'll be fine. But Howland was happy to do so, knowing being a staunch ally of House Bronn, and also he's kind of got a bit of a vested interest, because the enemy of your enemy can be your friend, and House Bronn and House Rookwood don't exactly get on particularly well either. Yes, Final Fantasy RPG, entirely different type of stream. That is entirely different. Now, if you are hungry for other entirely different kinds of streams, the last stream I did on here was a bit of a one-off, but actually I think it'll be something that I'll be doing a bit more often in my spare time here on the channel. Was on Friday. I played Valheim in our new section called Valheim Time. For those of you who aren't familiar with Valheim, it's a video game that released earlier this year. It's a really low taxing game, in the sense that it was a very small install, couple of gigabytes, which these days is unheard of. So it's not cutting edge graphics or anything like that, but it's a really well thought out kind of Viking themed world building and monster fighting, and just general RPG. I'd say a sandbox RPG is probably the best way of describing it. And it was a really fun stream. I had DM Stephen, who DMs the Cage campaign, which is our YouTube campaign, joining me. So us two DMs together, playing as our characters in Valheim, wandering around, hunting mythical stags, building shelters. Just really good fun. And we also, spoiler alert, things went south pretty quickly at one point as well. So if that tickles your interest, I would definitely recommend checking that out. In fact, the VOD has just gone up on our YouTube channel, so you can check that out for yourself at your leisure. Anyway, I'm incorrigible when it comes to plugging, so apologies for that. Let's continue on then. As per usual with Leobryn and his being a warlock with a Pact of the Tome, now that he has the ability to cast sending at will to people who are named in his book, and there is a limit on the number of people who can be named in the book, he has basically been using this at this time to keep Brucon up to date with everything that's been going on, so they don't have to have a big old explanation when they finally reunite with him in session 71. You should be studying. Thanks for joining us. Hope everyone is doing awesome. I hope you're doing awesome. Should be studying. Great to hear from you. Great to see you. Now, as I was saying, continuing on, it's been Leo's been keeping Brucon abreast of everything that's been going on, and then we've also the other part of the plan. Seth, for some reason, wanted to contact Greenblade, the ranger, because the ranger now is the one who has been given the bone dagger that Jackman had to keep safe, as he has a safe house kind of underground. Greenblade's good at not being noticed by people being of the area. Super Studying says, interesting T-shirt. This, my friend, is my favorite band of all time. It's not that I am a feeder, if you will. No, feeder is just the name of the band. Just I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. I mean, I would love to be, but I'm not. But check them out on Spotify and everywhere. Like, their music, so good. And also seeing them live, phenomenal. Like, they were as good, if not better, than the studio versions of their songs, and that is not a common thing with bands from my experience. So anyway, lots of sort of negotiations. So Malar contacts Greenblade in the hopes of arranging to meet up with him en route back to the Eyrie to liaise with Brucon to pick up the dagger on the way, because Seth has a cunning plan involving the bone dagger, and I guess we'll just see how that goes. And then after all this kind of negotiating, it's been a very long day. The group decided to go to the tavern, as is typical D&D fare, to just relax, have a few drinks, and while away the rest of the evening. And that is where they part company with Glaive, the aforementioned warforged, or should I say animated brass statue of a dwarf fighter who has been, since being alive, which has been for about 24 hours by this point, has been given a thirst for knowledge by Malar, and even been set homework. I mean, he's really had a really tough first day, because as soon as he appeared, suddenly he was fighting creatures he didn't know or understand, and things were on fire. A lot happens. You know, things went a bit off the rails in session, I think it was session 65 or 64. Just, yeah, a lot going on. And before he leaves, he is visited by Elusha, the goddess of hijinks. Now, in the world of the Manylands, there are a few different pantheons. The main one, the core one of the Manylands, is called the Eight, or the Great Eight, and Elusha is one of the eight. She is, as I said, the goddess of hijinks. So she's all about trickery and deceit and deception. And yes, suddenly Glaive, this automaton, for a better word, with sentience actually, is suddenly having this the goddess whispering to him inside his head, which would be disconcerting if you had been alive a bit longer than one day. Basically giving him some instructions and kind of reassuring him that the rest of the group will be fine, and that he can go off towards Rundar, because she has other plans for him, and so he should go off in that direction, which as a DM is a nice little well, the god's telling you to do this, off you go, which I wouldn't normally do. That's something that railroady, but because this was for a cameo, for a guest star, we needed to give them something definitive for them to be able to leave on, something very definite, rather than something a bit more wishy-washy. Like with the main PCs, you can let them deliberate. You can, let them come up with their own, carve their own path. Make it a bit more of a sandbox for them. Just give them some options and see where they go with it. Whereas I think when you want to kind of tie it in neatly for somebody who's just coming in to play a couple of sessions, you need to give a solid, cut and shut reason as to why they would leave. And so in that situation, having a goddess whispering to you just seems the most fitting. And that pretty much was the end of session 66. Wow, I've only covered one so far. Anyway, on to session 67. So the group, after Glaive leaves, they go and rest for the evening. And in the morning, they're visited by Fennell Henley, their housekeeper, who is very apologetic that she hadn't turned up the night before, but she was tending to her son, Fulgrim Henley, who had got in late and seemed to be quite singed, and the party immediately are kind of suspicious that perhaps this Fulgrim chap was one of the dwarf cultists during the skirmish of which Glaive was brought alive to in the abandoned brewery in town. So suspicion is aroused, but nothing more is kind of done with it at that point. I mean, the group are looking to leave. They don't want more reasons to stay in Hilberg at this point. But just FYI, because this is a behind the scenes kind of stream. Fulgrim Henley is in fact the leader of the dwarf cultists that were operating inside the abandoned brewery, and the party at this point believe that he's dead because, well, Seth is pretty sure that he stabbed him and he died. But when he went to do that final strike, it was noted that Fulgrim was about to cast a spell, and then suddenly, when that last blow came in, the spell supposedly dissipated. It didn't. What had happened was that he had readied an action. He was readying to cast. What's it called? Oh no, third level spell. Can you guess what the third level spell is that he cast on himself to make him appear dead? I can't remember. I didn't even write it in the notes which one that he did. But I believe it's not false life. That's to give you a buff on hit point. Feigned death. He cast feigned death on himself because a very devious chap wanted to appear dead so that he could then would awaken an hour later, and hopefully everyone had left, which in fact they had. Now that wasn't a foolproof plan. Fulgrim could have easily died. I mean, if they decided they were going to, I don't know, chop his head off or burn his body or something, then he would not be able to do much about that. But none of that happened. So he did, in fact, survive and will come back to fight another day and torment the party, I'm sure. But that's just between you and me, okay, viewers? So anyway, yes, Fenelon had put up a bed for Jackburn as well, because this whole day Jackburn has been waiting for Seth to get back to continue negotiations. And then finally, in session 67, after a lot of toing and froing, they finally settle on an amount to sell the house to Jackburn for. Jackburn using his Leomund's secret chest, which he happens to have, to store his worldly wealth. To then just kind of dip into that and pay off Seth and the rest of the party with a down payment. Meanwhile, back in the Eyrie, we catch up with Brucon again, the final part of his training, which he's I didn't note before, but he's training to use the tonfa, which is not an item that you'll find in your normal player's handbook, but it's a kind of a reskinned club. I've made it as a custom item for this game. Much like the tonfa in real life, it's kind of similar to a nightstick in that it is a club with a right-angled handle coming off of it that you can then kind of use to spin round the tonfa. So you can either have it out as a club, or you can then spin it back to then protect your forearm. And so the idea is that you can then the tonfa is, from what I gather from researching it in real life, is meant to be used more in defense than attack, and so I kind of reflected that with the item here, that it's a club which would do a d4 bludgeoning damage, but also when you wield it, or those who are trained to wield the tonfa can then add a +1 to their AC while they're wielding it, so their armor class. So the whole purpose of Brucon wanting to train with the monks here is because he got the tonfa off of the monks here, was to learn how to wield it himself so that he can also buff himself up and protect himself a bit more. And the final kind of challenge was, of course, facing the biggest rival, which is the head of the Dragonborn Wyvern Riders that were keeping an eye on him, Drez, who challenges him to a fight with his halberd, one-on-one during the rainstorm that then kind of swoops over the rest of the day in and around Burikrin and Richir. It's a big old thunderstorm. And so it's pretty epic cinematography already for this one-on-one showdown between Brucon and Drez. At one point, it looked very close to Brucon getting knocked unconscious, but instead, with Drez using not only his halberd but his unique subclass, which is our custom subclass, which I did a giveaway with back at the beginning of the year, I think, which is the Dragon Warrior Fighter subclass. It essentially takes a draconic bloodline in the same way as, I guess, a sorcerer with a draconic bloodline would take, or a Dragonborn would. You can choose what your bloodline is, and so you can infuse your weapons with that bloodline's attack damage. So in Drez's case, as having a blue dragon in his bloodline, he can then harness lightning into his attacks with his halberd. So he was not only hitting Brucon for a lot of damage with reach, but he was also zapping him with lightning at the same time. So adding, I think, a d8 onto the damage. So it was really kind of a nice buff, and it was making a very challenging fight for Brucon. But he managed to overwhelm his opponent through a very liberal use of Stunning Strike, because monks, turned the tide and won the battle. And at that point, when he won the fight and left Drez unconscious on the floor, that was when he knew that he could wield the tonfa. And so from then on, he's been able to have a +1 to his AC when using it. and he was very pleased in and out of game. But Bart was pleased with it. Brucon was pleased with it. I was pleased that we made that happen as well. It was great fun. And if you have monks in your game, I would definitely recommend looking up some like unique monk weapons or martial arts weapons, and seeing how you can seeing what weapons from the player's handbook that you can reskin. I think they even suggest it in the player's handbook under the monk class, to reskin some of the things to kind of make it more flavorful. But you don't just have to do the reskin. As I said, with the Tonfa, you can then add, like, experiment a bit, try it with your table, like add a different effect based on what in real life this particular martial arts weapon would be used for. I think you could come up with some really fun and interesting results. So yeah, that would be my recommendation with that. So yes, and Brucon also spends some time with the singing bowl and learns the properties, which I talked about earlier. So anyway, back with the rest of the group. This is where the remove curse thing happens with Leobrin and Malar and the cursed ring on Leo's finger. Ah! Yeah, he gets it removed in session 67 with the help of the remove curse spell, thanks to Brucon. And then, there's just some final admin with Seth trying to sell on some of the extra bits of equipment that they have acquired over their time, including the mithril breastplate, which he had stolen from the dead Fulgrim Hendley. I'm sure Fulgrim won't be annoyed about that. Selling it to Asim, the second in command of the garrison at Hilberg. So just little odd jobs like that. And then a very emotional, tearful goodbye to the much-beloved enigma that is Fleeting Look. So though obviously out of game, you would have noticed that Dan, so not to be confused with Dan who plays Malar, or DK as he's otherwise known, but Dan or DI or winning Dan, who plays Fleeting Look, the turquoise tiefling, had been MIA in the campaign for several weeks. I think from as far back as perhaps session 50 or session 55, somewhere like that. Just change of job and just made it nigh on impossible to be able to attend the sessions and things. And so it made sense at this point, as the group were going to leave Hilberg, that Fleeting would stay behind. And not only because the player wasn't there, but because Fleeting Look himself, who had become an NPC at this point, had been offered work. He was already a lance of the Order of the Broken Fang, who have a chapter throughout Burikrin and want to look after, protect the civilized world from cursed creatures. And there was kind of nobody in Hilberg at the moment who was doing that after his trainer, Rexland Swordclaw, left some time ago. But also, Fleeting's now been offered a job as a bouncer at Jackburn's new inn. So it all kind of meshes together that when they come back to Hilberg, they're going to have everyone's favourite NPC, Jackburn Winklebottom. I don't think the party like him very much, actually. And Fleeting Look now as well, waiting for them back in Hilberg. And I'm sure at some point later on in the campaign, the party will want and need to return to Hilberg, where the starter town, where it all started, sort of. So yeah, it was a very tearful farewell, particularly for Seth being best friends with Fleeting Look, and both of them wearing their matching tricorn hats and all of the history they've had, including the pivotal moment in session 51 when Seth admitted that Fleeting was in fact his best friend, and Fleeting actually dying at one point and then being resurrected. A lot went on. They've been through a lot together, and I think what capped it all off was Marshall as Leobrin, wanting to put Fleeting's name in his book. And Fleeting, one of his characteristic questions is asking what the collective noun is for things. And so the last one, before leaving Fleeting Look behind, Fleeting asks, what's the collective name that you would use for the people in your book? To which Leobrin, quite brilliantly, Marshall, without missing a beat, says, "I would call them friends." And like, if you just left it at that moment, the heart melts. That's so beautiful. Ah. But of course, it's fleeting look. He has no expressions. He's awkward. He dramatically undercuts most things. So after a pause, says, "Okay," and, and that's that. It was it was so much fun to be the NPC in that moment, but also hating myself at the same time. Hating the character, be like, no, because it's such a beautiful moment and he's going to rob it. But that is what he would do. So it just made it. It was on point. It was on brand for that character. But yes, a lovely moment nonetheless. And then we pick up in session 68, where the rainstorm has cometh as our party leave Hilberg, meaning they're trudging across the hillside, stepping into a lot of marshy, boggy terrain that has obviously occurred through the just torrential rain at this point. And they also have a couple of encounters on the road, including a group of giant toads, obviously lured out by the weather, or at least... I think encounter's a strong term for coming across these giant toads, because they were basically immediately dispatched by Naeris casting a fireball and just completely. I think possibly one of the giant toads died, and the rest of them freaked out and left. Because no, I'm not going to deal with that at that point. Even though, and again, dramatically undercut that fireball moment from Naeris, being the grumpy person that she is, completely undercut by Leobrin. Immediately after the fireball lands, going, "We come in peace," after decimating the giant toads, like leaving them all scorched and blackened by the attack. Because as you can tell, we have a lot of fun here on Slice and Dice in the Manylands campaign. Comedy naturally ensues in a lot of D&D games, and this one is no exception. So they, after coming across the toads, they then also happen across a rather dishevelled and rather disgruntled lady by the name of Helen, who supposedly had gone into the woods with her lover, only to be very disappointed by him, and so disappointed, scorned, and disgruntled that she has a bag with all of his clothes in it, which he's taken with her. She gives the bag to the party. They find, or Seth, should I say, because obviously it's going to be Seth rummaging through the loot, finds not only a coin purse and the fellow's clothes, but also some magical boots, which turns out are the boots of the Winterlands, a very fancy magical item, which Seth, the magpie that he is, immediately wants to take a hold of for himself. Seth is an absolute monster. It is evident. It is known at this point. And later on, as they're trying to find their way back to Svirfhaven, because they have the ingredients to make the potion of cure curse, which is what they need to give to their lycanthropic charge back at the temple of Spark in Hilberg. During the werewolf thing, a few people got bitten, including a noble lady from the forest nation of Loranlas, which is where Leobrin hails from, and her name is Greta Grouse, and she is the only surviving lycanthropic individual now, and so they're trying to whip up the potion of cure curse to cure her, so that they can save somebody from that dreadful cursed disease. So that was their objective, and happily, Svirfhaven, which is also where Brina hails from, is on the way back. They're going to go through past it on the way back to the Eyrie. But the rain proves, and the clouds and the thunder proves very difficult. It kind of mars their progress with navigating. For Seth in particular, being a sailor, he's more used to reading the stars and so on. And so bad weather like this makes navigation quite difficult. But Brina helps the party figure their way back to the entrance to Svirfhaven in an outcropping of rocks. And it's in this outcropping of rocks where they find Beckett, a halfling, who's naked. As it turns out, Helen, a human lady, has been lured onto a blind date with who she believed was going to be a very tall man. But as it turns out, it was a very short halfling who, not through his own not through completely his own fault. He had been a bit misled by his dating agency, Subtle Services, which has come up earlier in the campaign. I'll get to that in a second. But he'd been misled by his agent, who had told him, who'd basically given him the advice to, if you like taller people, and Beckett seems to apparently like medium creatures rather than small creatures, like different strokes. Had then wrote on his dating profile via letter, of course, because this is medieval fantasy, so of course it is by carrier pigeon or however they transfer messages or letters, should I say. And in this case with Beckett, he does so by his homunculus servant owl named Samwise. So a mechanical owl named Samwise delivers his post for him, his love letters and such, and had arranged with Helen to meet her, to take her out, for a romantic day out in the forest. And then the thunderstorm comes, and Beckett is not the man that he claimed to be in his letters, but is in fact a halfling who has lied to Helen, and equally has now literally been rained on her parade as well. And so no wonder she was disgruntled. But he's then left marooned, naked, in the rocky outcropping. His owl is not with him at this point. We don't know about the owl at this point, but what had happened is he'd sent the owl back to his home in Halfreach to retrieve some clothes for him, being very practical, and the rest of his gear. And so he's there hiding out in the rocky outcropping. The party have quite a funny exchange with him before Malar offers him something from his bag, a gold cloak, which he took way back in, I think, session 2 or 3, and it'd just been sitting in his bag ever since. So he gives that to the halfling so that he can cover himself, and then offers for Beckett, to the halfling, to go with the rest of the party into Svirfhaven to get out of the rain, and also so they can continue on their mission. And they do so. And this is the first time that the party get to see the inner workings of Svirfhaven, with the exception of Leobrin and, of course, Brina, who has lived there all her life before coming to the surface. So Svirfhaven, as it sounds, is and the Svirfs in the Manylands, very much influenced by the Smurfs, small creatures, although in this case, in the Underdark, they dwell underground, and they're not as cheery and whimsical as the Smurfs would be. In fact, they're quite the opposite in terms of their personality, but they try and make up for that by having very brightly coloured hair, like the Trolls figurines, and also having their Smurf-like names. So Brina, although that's her real name, is her mother, Sapphire Svirf, insists that Brina is called Sparkle Svirf, and will not hear, despite how confused I got, that she should be called by her actual name, Brina. And similarly, the party meets some of the other eclectic Svirfs in Svirfhaven, including the second in command, Orderly Svirf, who's also head of all the accounts and paperwork, Elder Svirf, who is naturally like Papa Svirf, and wearing red rather than white, as per everyone else. There's also a Dr. Svirf, who is the doctor, surprisingly, and medic of the most medical of everyone in Svirfhaven, and they also meet Sensei Svirf, who is the only one of the Svirfs who has been heavily influenced by the monks, the Aarakocra monks, when they did dealings some years ago. But they're not a cheerful bunch, as I said. And it becomes apparent why. They're quite worried because Svirfhaven is not their original home, but it's where they've gone after negotiating, thanks to Barter Svirf and Haggle Svirf, a deal with a Zorn, which is a subterranean freakish monster. In fact, the party haven't actually met the Zorn at this point, but the Zorn is, as per the monster manual, this weird subterranean creature of the Underdark with 3 legs and 3 arms and just one big eye, and the mouth is kind of at the top here, with these earthy tones to its stone-like flesh. It's all very It's all very D&D. It's all very weird. But anyway, the Zorn have been entrusted to protect Svirfhaven. It was the Zorn's home originally, where Svirfhaven is, but they've been entrusted to protect the entrance to the entrance to Svirfhaven from the rest of the Underdark, because the Drow are after the Svirf Neblin. They want to take the Svirfs for themselves. And the latest in that drama is that the supply of gems, which the Zorn eat, the Zorn feed off of gems, has run out. And so unless they get some soon, the Zorn is going to leave. Typically, because, this is a game, after the party arrive and rest up for the night, they then awake to find the Drow have invaded as the Zorn have disappeared. And so they awake to find themselves covered in spiders' webs and are set upon. Now we're into session 69, by the way, with the Drow, who are not paying much attention to the party, with the exception of Brina, who they have Svirfnapped, and that is the name of session 69. And I didn't even acknowledge at the time that it was session 69 for the cheap laugh. I completely forgot about it. But here we are. We live and we learn. So many of the Svirfs are captured in these web sacks by the Drow and their giant spiders and the like, including the leader of this particular ambush group, a Drow mage, who, they're whipping up Svirfs, and as soon as the party start attacking, they retaliate and but also make a tactical retreat. And one of the nasty things that the Drow, or devious things that the Drow can do, is cast the darkness spell, which means that they can essentially make their own cover, and that's exactly what they did. They just, blotted out the battlefield with darkness, Svirfhaven with the darkness spell before making their escape out of the main entrance, shielding them from the party and anyone else who would be trying to stop them. And so this happens. They realize that Brina is missing and has been taken, along with Elder Svirf, the leader of Svirfhaven, and Brina's mother, Sapphire Svirf, has also been taken, and there are others too, of course, but those are the most prominent figures. And so while Dr. Svirf has to stay behind, tending to the wounded, and Audley Svirf is trying to hold everything together, Sensei Svirf recommends that they go and get after the attackers as quickly as possible. It's very hard, I think, especially when you've set a precedent for the party being able to deliberate and take their time when solving a mystery or when approaching an objective. It's quite hard to kind of re-energize. It certainly is over the internet. I imagine it might be slightly easier in person, but to have that sense of urgency, and that was kind of what I tried to do with Session 69. I think it worked to an extent that they would have to act quickly to catch up with these ambushers, with the abductors. And in fairness, they also again had I think each of the characters had a chance to shine, with Malar's Lantern of Revealing yet again doing a great job. I think the Lantern of Revealing is one of those magic items that I think doesn't get enough praise, doesn't get enough time to shine in many games. And especially if you go by rules as written, it doesn't appear to be that great, because according to the entry in the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Lantern of Revealing will reveal any invisible creatures within its radius, when it's lit. But and that's it, just invisible creatures. So I kind of took it a bit further than that. Because that's great if you have a campaign that's full of invisible creatures, but if you don't, it doesn't do anything. So for me, I've kind of expanded on that a bit, and so it will reveal not only invisible creatures, but it will reveal creatures who are trying to blend in to hide. Like I think some troglodytes kind of camouflage themselves by blending into the walls, and the Svirfs would do that as well. But also to kind of uncover hidden entrances. I kind of springs to mind a similar lantern in The Witcher 3, which you can use to kind of reveal illusions in sort of fake walls and so on. So it felt like the Lantern Revealing should do that. And in this moment, when they're looking for the Drow, they come to a two-way fork, and it's either the Drow have gone left or they've gone straight on. Using the Lantern Revealing, oh no, hang on, there is another passage to the right, up high, which we wouldn't have seen had we not used that light. So it was great to have a moment for that to shine, and especially since Malar hasn't been using the Lantern Revealing, as he's had his own continual flame, and that got snuffed out by the darkness spell because of the effects of the darkness spell. So it was nice to then be like, the old faithful's back, I can light that one up, and off we go. So they get on after the Drow, finding the routes that they actually took
if they had gone different routes, things could have gone terribly, because not only would the drow possibly have got away, but also they would have got onto some possibly even more deadly challenges than facing against the drow and their final stand at the underground lake. But anyway, as they get hot on the heels of the drow, who have left traps along their route as well, there's a swinging spike door. There was also a crossbow bolt with a poisoned bolt, booby trapped, ready to which was, I think it was by a magical glyph. When one of the party would pass over the glyph, the crossbow bolt would shoot out at them, and that one-shotted Leobrin. He went down like a sack of spuds just from that one arrow. Again, with his low hit points, it's not completely surprising, but still deadly effect with that. But the party, got him up, continued on, and managed to kind of round a corner, heading into the lake, with Seth using the message spell to then be able to contact Brina so that he could work out exactly where she was. And so that's what leads them to that underground lake. And as they round the corner, they find webbing on the floor around them. They manage to avoid it, all except Naeris, who gets bogged down in the webbing. But Naeris, with her own unique abilities, when she casts a fire spell, fire radiates around her, and so that would then melt the webbing and free her on her next turn. And that's when we get into session 70. Here we are, almost back up to the present, ladies and gentlemen. So as I said, Seth locates Brina. They can see that the drow have been lying in wait for the party. They've set this trap for them, the ones that aren't loading Svirfs onto the boats. And as most of the party charge through, get beyond the webbing, get into the fray, Seth obviously dueling one-on-one with drow to try and remove them from the fight, and doing exceedingly well at that. Leobrin firing from afar and then dropping to the deck to try and avoid the crossbow fire, and Malar making a break to the right to try and impede more of what's going on with the boats. Naeris then tries to kind of nuke, as is kind of characterful and usual for her at this point. It's protocol for her to then try and fireball a load of enemies. She does so, also setting fire to a boat which has a load of captured Svirfneblin on it, which is... It was a choice, but I think it's great when things like that happen, because with Naeris it happens quite a lot, being that fire is the destructive element, and that is her propensity for fire needs to have consequences. Your actions should have consequences, and so you can't. I think you're doing a disservice to your players by putting a velvet glove over their fist when they destroy something. They need to feel the weight behind their decisions, and it will inform the character later on as well. Like, Naeris may be more careful in the future after having horrifically burned some innocents. May have changed her. Certainly, her bad experiences have changed her thus far. So maybe. She might need to be scared straight, as it were, back onto the straight and narrow, with being a good person and not, burning the whole place to the ground. Who knows? I guess we'll find out later on. But yes, and that's not the only threat, though, to the party, with the drow lying in wait to ambush them with their crossbows. There's also a elite drow warrior who's wielding a magical short bow that's basically is the binding bow, which when you allows you to, as a bonus action, cast ensnaring strike, which is a ranger spell, and only a ranger spell, as far as I'm aware, possibly for some subclasses as well. But it's one of those spells that I think is really cool, but I don't think enough people use it, because, again, it's just for rangers and a few other exceptions. And even then, rangers don't necessarily choose it. If they do, it's usually at the expense of Hunter's Mark, which would give you more consistent damage, although it wouldn't have the control effects. Yeah, Oath of the Ancient Paladins, you're quite right, Pavel, also have that effect. I think there might be a couple of others, especially like now with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. There's probably another one that has it, but the only full class that can use Ensnaring Strike are rangers. And so it's nice to, and especially also that there aren't many magical bows in the Dungeon Master's Guide, so there's lots of potential to create your own one. And so this weapon is essentially a +1 short bow that also allows you 3 times per day to cast Ensnaring Strike, DC 15. So it's quite a powerful item, but a common item and not an uncommon magic item and not an attunement item, because casting Ensnaring Strike is a concentration spell. So I feel if you've got concentration with it, then then not having attunement seems like a good trade-off to keep it as an uncommon item. I think I think if it didn't have the concentration element and it didn't have attunement, that wouldn't make sense. I would put it as probably a much rarer item in that case. The other trade-off would be to have it not being concentration but being an attunement item, which equally I think could work. But anyway, so there's the Drow Elite Warrior using that, and to top it all off, when Leo dives to the ground to avoid the crossbow fire, that then exposes him to the Drider that was lying in wait on the ceiling to then descend down and take a few bites out of him, and very quickly. In fact, I think in one round, Leo and Naeris are both taken down by the Drider. Which means things look a little bit ropey for the party, but fortunately Brina has also managed to free herself from her webbing, and so foils the Drow Mage, who is also involved in this fight. The Drow Mage got horrifically wounded by Seth in the first encounter back in Svirfhaven when they were all covered in webbing, but managed to escape by turning himself invisible. This was actually greater invisibility that he cast on himself, and so he was causing more mischief during the fracas at the underground lake during the melee, because he's blasting off spells and no one can see him. Until that is, he gets cocky, I get cocky, and cast a 4th level concentration spell, or 5th level concentration spell, which means he has to break his concentration on greater invisibility. But it was meant to be a really powerful spell, and then I completely undermined myself by then pointing out that Brina would cast Counterspell at this point, and then got Seth to roll it, and then, yes, Brina succeeded on the Counterspell, and so nothing happened, but the Drow Mage reappeared, and that was the opening that we were looking for, so that we could then destroy him. And anyway, long story short, Session 70, a lot of this is the skirmish at the underground lake. The heroes win, they defeat the Drow. The Drow realise that their number's up and try to escape, and they all end up dying rather than escaping. The party get, from the bodies of the fallen, they manage to get, as I said, the binding bow. They also get some gems, which happily the Svirfhaven are in dire need of gems to feed the Zorn, or at least try and entice the Zorn back. They also find 300 gold pieces worth of diamonds, which is an oddly specific amount and the exact amount that Malar would need to cast Revivify, so winning, and that was on the corpse of the mage. And then they also find vials of Drow poison, because Drow, they love their poisons. They love making you make Constitution saving throws after you've taken some damage from them, and then be like, "Ha-ha, you're poisoned for an hour," and like, very, very irritating. But yes, also, but that wasn't enough for our group, and wasn't enough for the Svirfs. Elder Svirf, so grateful to the party for saving her and the rest of her kin that she offers them over, I think, 300 gold pieces worth of gnomish trinkets, because Svirfhaven is a barter currency. They don't. Sorry, it's a barter kind of market. It's they exchange. It's based entirely on exchanging goods rather than any currency. They don't have a currency-based system. So they can only give items which could be worth something, usually in exchange for something else. But as a show of gratitude to the party, they gift them with all of these items. But that's not enough for Seth, who has the knowledge of a basilisk cave, the basilisk cave, which has an entire wall filled to the brim with gems encrusted in the walls. And so he negotiates being given a very fancy magical item, which the Svirf had been keeping, believing it to be an ill omen and not wanting to use it themselves, as it was the last gift given to them by the Drow, who betrayed them and so the Svirfs and the Drow were once partners and allies and trading partners, and then the Drow mischievous and nefarious types that they are, betrayed the Svirfneblin, trying to enslave them for themselves. And so that's what prompted the Svirfs to try and escape and to negotiate with the Zorn and move to their new home in Svirfhaven. So the Drow have a lot to answer for there. And anyway, they have a Drow scimitar, which was the last gift given to the Svirfs by the Drow. And so they cautiously hand that over to Seth, who later realizes, much to James's amazement and excitement, that it was actually a scimitar of speed, which is actually a very nifty, very rare magical item. Being able to make an attack with a bonus action is quite handy, very flexible. But these things always come with a price, as I said earlier, and so Seth will find out eventually what that price may be. But nonetheless, a very cool item, and I think when an item is as good as that, there needs to be some kind of pause for thought at some point, or some kind of twist in the tale to make it just that much more entertaining. So with their gifts in tow and with a hero's exit, because the entirety of Svirfhaven, upon them leaving, by complete contrast to when they arrived and were greeted with some hostility by the Svirfs. Upon leaving, the Svirfs make an arch. They are all clapping and cheering and seeing them out of Svirfhaven, thanking them for their help. But not before some shenanigans with Beckett, who arrived back with his mechanical owl and some clothes on this time, revealing that he was in fact an artificer. And the party have been after an artificer for a little while, but they didn't seem to really take him up on it. But Beckett's now in the world and introduced to them, and somebody they could potentially find and commission later on. But he demonstrated some of his wares by getting Seth not only to give the boots back, but then in exchange offering these little trinkets that he could enchant. One for Seth, one for Malar, who had very specific plans for their items, both of which included basically annoying the other person or undermining the other person. And it was just so funny. It was just so great how these things stacked up. Because we originally had Malar wanting to have an item with a recorded message that basically said, "Oh, Seth, I don't think you should do that. Oh, Seth, I don't think you should do that. Oh," on whatever the item was. In this case, it was a leather strap, leather wristband. They could then give to Seth, and that would go off. I believe there was a trigger for it. I'll have to double check what the trigger was for it. It was only like a week ago. But Seth then also got, after Beckett's encouragement, got a second item enchanted. This one that would mask Malar's odor every time he parped, because it seems every time Malar sleeps he farts. So then he got a ring enchanted that would then give off the smell of roses when Malar farted. And so this made for an hilarious chain reaction, because the trigger for the it wasn't for Malar farting. I believe it was for Malar saying, "Oh," would be the trigger for the rose smell. I think yes. And so when they're both trying to get the other to set off the trigger for their items, we then have the trigger goes off for the voice recorded item, which then starts with Mr. Seth, and then with the as the trigger for the lavender smell or roses smell. It's just hilarity ensues. It's really good fun. And not only that, but before that, we also had a great popular culture reference with Brina casting Fly on Malar. So we had a flying Loxodon or elephant man flying over to whisk up methane. Thanks, Pavel. Flying Malar, flying through over the lake to try and rescue these Svirfs that were marooned on their boats. We had Seth diving into the water to try and save drowning Svirf babies and succeeding. Just overall, just great rescue effort, and then also basically convincing the Svirfs, who didn't take much convincing, that Leobrin was the leader of the heroes and that he should be hugged by all the Svirfs. All of these Svirfs in their very dirty robes coming over and rubbing themselves all over Leobrin. Again, another comedic moment. It really was great fun. And so so all this happens, and the group are ready to leave to head on to continue on to the Eyrie. Before doing so, Leo drops Brucon a message to tell them that they're on their way and what's happened at Svirfhaven, and Brucon then replies, notifying Leo that Greenblade has now gone to the Eyrie rather than the original meet spot, because apparently there are eyes everywhere. So when the party finally get back to the surface and continue on foot with Beckett in tow, they get to try out their new items, play with that, and immediately Leo is asked to make a wisdom saving throw, and he fails it. And then the effect is not told to him of what happens, and so paranoia is starting to creep in with the players at this point. So like, what is happening here? Because imagination runs wild. As soon as you tell them exactly what it is, then that dispels it. And so there's some magic in keeping your cards close to your chest on this one. Although I would say that this is probably an effect that can be easily guessed. I would say, but anyway. They also notice that carrion birds seem to be following them as they continue on their journey. And eventually, when they get to the crossroads, that is where Beckett parts ways with them, noting that if they are back in town in Halfreach, they should look him up, or if they need anything enchanted, he's the guy to go to. Although not to meet him in Morningill, because that's where the agency is, which is called Subtle Services. Now, this was a bit of a deep cut, but Subtle Services is the name of the agency which the spy Callie Shallows is a part of. Callie Shallows being the kind of obnoxious New York-style PI who the party worked alongside way back in early session, I think session 3 and 4, when they were looking into the Halfreach manufactory. That was Callie Shallows. So Subtle Services seems to not only deal with PIs and investigators and detectives, but also apparently as a dating agency, because it's another subtle service, I guess, more sort of boutique dating agency. So yeah, it was just so for me, like as a world builder, that's like a lovely little callback, and I don't think it ever got to see light of day. So it's really nice to kind of have a stream like this where I can go, this is what I meant. And hopefully it will come up again at some point. Subtle Services may have quite a good reach, so they may well be used at some other time. And so where we've left things with the group is that they have now arrived at the foot of the mountain. That's the mountain up to the Eyrie, with all of their climbing gear already in place from when they ascended the first time. So it should be relatively easy for them to scale the mountain and get back to their friend Brucon. And finally, the entire party will be reunited. And finally, in real life, we should have the entire party reunited as in all of us attending a session, because it's been a long time since we've had all 6 players all together, bearing in mind, of course, Brina Angelique is now a fully fledged member of the party. She's been off for a little while now, having to go off to Amsterdam for personal reasons on her own mission, her own philanthropic mission, if I might say so. And so she's been away for a while. Some of the others have also struggled with the Monday night sessions, and so now we're moving it to Thursdays fortnightly from June the 10th. That's when the next session will be. I really hope you can join us for that, our first ever Thursday session. It'd be really great to get the support for our first ever stream on that day, and not only that, but also we're getting in lines with some of the greats of D&D. Critical Role is also on a Thursday, obviously not at the same time because they're over in America, so we can also cash in on the hashtag Is It Thursday Yet and just really get kind of integrated more into the D&D community, so that's quite exciting as well. So yes, if you can join us for that, please do so. I hope to hear from you all then. Thank you so much for tuning in today. That wraps up everything for what happened in sessions 66 through 70, and now you are best placed to join in the action with us. That's on Thursday the 10th of June for our inaugural Thursday session from 7:30 p.m. British summertime, ladies and gentlemen, right here on Twitch. Before that comes up, I will be keeping you posted as to when our next session of The Cage will be dropping, and in addition to that, our video edition of Baldoa, our podcast series. You can find more information about all of these things on our social media at slice&d6, and you can of course look at our podcast page, our YouTube page, and obviously our Twitch channel, and anywhere else that you would find things Slice and Dice for more information. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this Bank Holiday Monday. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and whatever you're up to, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.